1. Static and shadows. The wind was a screaming banshee, tearing across the deck of the Wanderer, Finn's painstakingly restored 47-foot sailboat. Snow whipped against the windows, blurring the already bleak grey expanse of the Weddell Sea. Finn, a meticulous historian with a particular fascination for the lost expeditions of the early 20th century, wrestled with the antenna, attempting to sharpen the reception. Leo, his older brother and the boat's chief engineer, was wrestling with the ancient radio, a tangle of wires and dials. "Nothing but static," Leo grumbled, his face smeared with grease. "It's like the whole ocean is trying to drown out a whisper." Then it shifted. A faint, rhythmic pulse cut through the static, a series of brief bursts of encoded sound. "Wait a second," Leo said, his eyes widening. "There's something there. A repeating signal, and it's odd. The signal wasn't a distress call. It wasn't broadcasting any recognizable message. It was a complex pattern of tones, like a forgotten language." As they worked to isolate the source, they discovered another character, a grizzled, solitary fisherman named Silas. Silas operated a small research station a few miles distant, and he'd reported receiving the same strange signal for weeks. He was a weathered man, a former naval officer, haunted by something he wouldn't discuss. "It's like a ghost," Silas rasped, his eyes fixated on the radio. "Something's down there," broadcasting into the void. Silas introduced them to his two working dogs, a massive Alaskan Malamute named Kodiak and a sleek border collie named Echo, both trained for tracking and working in extreme conditions. Kodiak, in particular, seemed unnervingly alert, his ears constantly rotating, as if listening to something beyond human hearing. "The signal started just before the storm," Silas explained, his voice low. "I've been trying to find its source, but the sea is a cruel mistress." As the day wore on, the signal grew stronger, accompanied by a subtle, unnerving shift in the weather. The wind intensified, the snow fell heavier, and an almost palpable sense of dread settled over the ship. Suddenly, Echo began barking incessantly, pulling at her leash and staring intently at the horizon. "What is it, Echo?" Leo shouted over the wind. Just then, a dense fog rolled in, obscuring the ship and everything around them. The signal vanished, replaced by a profound, unsettling silence. They were alone, adrift in a swirling white abyss, the strange radio signal, their only clue. Chapter 2. Following the Echo. The following days were a brutal test of their skills and endurance. The storm hadn't broken, and the Wanderer was tossed relentlessly by mountainous waves. Leo, a skilled navigator and engineer, used the signal, when it returned sporadically, to guide them, believing the source of the transmission was somewhere nearby. Silas, despite his reticence, proved an invaluable resource, providing weather forecasts and his knowledge of the region's treacherous currents. Kodiak remarkably seemed to anticipate the waves, almost guiding the ship through the most violent swells. They discovered a small, frozen bay, and while scouting, found a discarded research station, long abandoned but containing some salvaged equipment and a handwritten logbook. The logbook belonged to a Dr. Alastair Finch, a 20th century explorer who disappeared while investigating strange radio signals in this very area. Finch's last entry was chilling. The signal, "It seems to be leading me somewhere, something ancient, something hungry." As they explored the bay, they noticed something unnatural, perfectly symmetrical ice formations, arranged in patterns that defied the chaotic forces of the storm. Echo began to grow agitated, relentlessly pulling towards a narrow ice-choked passage. Silas, unnerved, suggested they turn back, but Leo, driven by a growing obsession with the signal, insisted on proceeding. "We're on the trail of a mystery," he argued. "We can't just abandon it." The passage was dark and claustrophobic, the air thick with an unnatural cold. They encountered strange echoes, seemingly originating from nowhere. The dogs became increasingly frantic, and Kodiak began to growl, his eyes fixated on something beyond the range of human vision. Suddenly, a large, shimmering shape materialized out of the fog, a colossal submerged structure, seemingly carved from ice and dominated by an enormous metallic antenna. To be continued. Chapters 3 to 8 will continue this narrative. Chapter 4, The Awakening. Beneath the sea erupted. A shockwave rippled outward from the depths, lifting the Wanderer like a toy in a child's hand. The waves became erratic, unnatural, moving not with the wind, but in response to something stirring far below. The radio screeched back to life, the same haunting signal, now louder and faster, like a heartbeat accelerating in panic. Echo whimpered, pressing against Leo's leg, her fur standing on end. Kodiak began barking uncontrollably, staring into the water. The entire crew, Leo, Finn, Silas, rushed to the railing, staring in disbelief as the surface of the ocean began to distort, forming circular patterns of light. Then from the depths, a shape emerged. Massive. Impossible. A living structure that defied geometry, all pulsating flesh and crystalline growth, its tendrils reaching toward the ship like hungry vines. The devourer had awoken. Finn screamed over the howling wind, "We have to go! Now!" But the ship's engine refused to start, the electronics fried by an unseen force. Silas grabbed the manual pump, desperately trying to keep water out as the hull creaked under the mounting pressure. The devourer's tendrils brushed the hull, and instantly memories not their own flooded their minds. Cities consumed, stars extinguished, worlds silenced. It wasn't just a creature, it was hunger incarnate. Leo, trembling, realised something. The signal wasn't a warning beacon. It was a containment alarm, and they had just opened the lock. He turned to Silas, his voice barely audible through the storm. "We need to shut it back in." "How?" Silas shouted. "We don't even understand what it is." Leo pointed to the frozen observatory on the screen, the antenna still flickering faintly through the static. "That thing, it's a prison key. If we can overload it, maybe we can seal it again." Finn's eyes widened. "And if you're wrong?" Leo met his gaze. "Then we die trying." Chapter 5, The Descent. Using the last of their power reserves, Leo deployed the submersible once more, this time equipped with a jury-rigged fusion core meant to detonate on command. The plan was simple, but suicidal. Deliver the core into the heart of the antenna structure, triggering an implosion that would collapse the dimensional rift. As the ROV descended, the water seemed alive, not with movement, but with presence. Shapes moved within the darkness, whispering in languages older than sound. The sonar readings became incomprehensible. It was as if the ocean itself was folding inward. Meanwhile, on deck, Finn's nose began to bleed. "It's talking to me," he gasped. "It's promising me everything." "Don't listen!" Leo shouted, slapping him back to focus. "It's lying!" The ROV reached the base of the structure. The antenna pulsed brighter as if sensing the intrusion. The devourer's voice echoed through the hull. Deep, resonant, infinite. "You cannot contain hunger." Leo triggered the detonation. For a moment everything went silent. The sea froze mid-motion. The light from the antenna collapsed inward, forming a singularity of pure darkness. Then, impact. A blinding flash consumed the world. Would you like me to continue with part 4, final chapters 6 to 8, and chapter 6, The Silence? After. When Leo opened his eyes, there was no sound, no wind, no ocean, only an endless white expanse stretching in every direction. For a moment he wondered if he was dead. Then he heard it, faint, almost imperceptible, a heartbeat, not his own. Echo was there beside him, tail still, eyes fixed on the horizon. Ahead, a figure appeared through the haze. Finn, alive. Barely. His clothes were torn, his skin pale and frostbitten, but he was breathing. "Where are we?" Finn whispered. Leo scanned the horizon. The sky shimmered like liquid glass, and in it, faint reflections of the world above, the Wanderer, the sea, the frozen observatory, flickered like ghosts. "I think," Leo hesitated, "we're inside the rift." The realization hit like a blade of ice. They hadn't destroyed the portal. They had inverted it, folded themselves inside the barrier meant to contain the devourer. The voice returned, softer now, closer. "You sealed the door, but the hunger remains." Leo fell to his knees. "We did what we had to. You'll never escape again." The ground beneath him pulsed with faint blue light, the same colour as the observatory's glow. The dimension itself seemed to sigh. Then, one by one, the reflections in the sky faded, until there was nothing left but white. Chapter 7. The return weeks later, the US Coast Guard found the Wanderer drifting off the coast of Iceland. The ship was battered but intact. There was no sign of its crew. The logbook, however, survived, containing Leo's final entry, open quote, "If this log is found, know this, the sea is not empties, it listens, and sometimes it answers." Close quote. The radio, recovered from the wreck, continued to emit faint, rhythmic pulses, identical to the original signal that had lured them north. Experts dismissed it as random static, but those who listened long enough swore they could hear something else within it. A whisper, repeating the same phrase over and over. Open quote, still hungry. Close quote. Chapter 8, The Devourer. Waits beneath the ice, deeper than any sonar could reach, the observatory still stands. Its antenna, fractured but not dead, hums faintly. The cracks in its structure glow, pulsing, breathing, like veins beneath translucent skin. A single shadow moves through the frozen corridors. It pauses before the control altar, placing a hand upon the surface. The lights flicker in response. It is Silas, or rather what remains of him. His voice is no longer entirely human when he speaks. Soon, he murmurs, eyes glowing faintly blue. Soon it will feed again. The camera of an unmanned research drone, thousands of feet above, captures the faintest blip of movement on its thermal scan. Something vast and shapeless rising from the abyss. And then, silence. The radio goes dead. Epilogue. Far away, in a cluttered coastal radio shack, an amateur operator in Newfoundland tunes his receiver late one night. He picks up a strange, rhythmic pulse on a forgotten frequency. He leans in, adjusting the dials. What in the hell is that? The sound grows clearer, a low, steady thrum, then unmistakably a voice. It's faint, distant, but human. This is Leo Finch. The sea is not what you think it is. Static. Then the pulse begins again, steady, deliberate, hungry. The operator stares at his receiver, transfixed. He doesn't notice the condensation forming on the windows, the frost crawling inward like veins of ice. He doesn't notice the whisper, just behind him until it's too late.